today's webinar, we have Karina Gascon, an investment associate, giving you an in-depth look at how our scorecard works and how you can leverage it to make informed decisions about investments and how to reduce your fiduciary risk.
All right. Thank you, Ashley, for that introduction. My name is Karina Gascon. I am an investment associate here at RPAG, and today I'll be walking you through how you can maximize your investment success using the RPAG scorecard. So I'll be going over the scorecard's design, the value add the scorecard brings, and then I will be finishing off with how you can actually maximize investment success with the scorecard and the complementary reports that can be used in alignment with the scorecard as well. So to start things off, we'll go over the scorecard design. So what is the scorecard designed to do? The scorecard system was created as a way to score funds based on multiple criteria and analytics that were chosen because they are the most commonly used and specific analytics that will help identify manager skill in the scorecard. So what's the result? The result is a straightforward 10-point numerical system that will help managers easily identify and monitor funds and fund managers. So there are three specific objectives of the scorecard system. The first one is that it identifies manager skill. So the scorecard aims to identify manager skill through a lot of different criteria and analytics that I'll get into further in this presentation. And we identify manager skill over an entire market cycle. So not just looking at the quarter outperformer, we're looking at long periods of time that are specific to identifying skillful managers for retirement purposes. And so the second objective is the scorecard enhances the investment due diligence process. So we're able to dive deeper into the analysis of certain asset classes and certain funds and certain fund managers by having this scorecard system available. Now, the last objective is that the scorecard minimizes exposure to fiduciary liability. So it creates a repeatable and documentable process that plan sponsors can use to monitor their plan's investments, which therefore reduces their liability. So the scorecard is designed to promote action and can be dialed up or dialed down based on the needs of the plan sponsors or how comfortable you as an advisor may feel in diving deeper into these specific scorecard analytics. And I'll get into how you can do that throughout this presentation. So the next slide here, I'll go over the capabilities of the scorecard. The first capability of the scorecard is that it is a single, easy to understand number. So here's where the scorecard can really be dialed down. If plan sponsors just want a single, easy to understand number, that's what the scorecard provides. It provides a way for fiduciaries to evaluate investments in a more comprehensive manner through that single score, and is a super easy number to understand that can be directly integrated into the IPS, which is another capability of the scorecard. RPAG offers a number of sample IPSs within the resource center, and the scorecard is directly integrated into these investment policy statements and is a great way that it can reduce fiduciary liability and creates a repeatable and documentable process for those fiduciaries. And then another capability is the score itself. The fund score is a tool by providing that 0 to 10 number, with 7 to 10 being acceptable. Watchlist funds are anything below 6, but we really dive deeper into that with watchlist funds being those 5 to 6, where additional due diligence and monitoring may need to occur. And then those funds that receive those 0 to 4 scores require more review and some extra due diligence, where the fund score itself and the scorecard can really help identify those areas of concern and may provide that extra layer that plan sponsors or you as advisors might want to dig a little bit deeper into. So that gets me into the last capability of the scorecard. It identifies areas of concern, and it's a really easy way to see where you might need to drill down in those areas that might need to be understood more, require some extra due diligence, whether that be from a quantitative or qualitative aspect. So in summary of this slide, the capabilities, it's a single, easy to understand number. That's what the scorecard creates. It can be directly integrated into the IPS, which minimizes fiduciary risk. The score itself is a great tool by having that single, easy to understand number, which directly links back to the IPS. And then that number itself allows us to identify those areas of concern where we can either dial up our due diligence or dial down our due diligence, depending on what the score itself is. So after going over the capabilities of the scorecard, one thing that's really unique to RPAG and the design of the scorecard itself is that we've categorized funds and sorted them into 3 different investment strategies, this being active, asset allocation, and passive. So we've done this because it's a way that we're able to dictate these managers' style and really be able to dive deeper into these analytics specific to the specific investment strategy that they are. So again, active funds, we're looking for those active managers, those managers that can outperform, whether that's on an absolute or relative basis from a return or risk perspective. Those asset allocators, we've designed a scorecard specifically looking for those asset allocators that provide skill and add value. And then passive funds, we've created a scorecard that's specific to finding those funds that are staying style pure and tracking their benchmark and sticking to that passive mandate. So those are the 3 categories and those 3 scorecards that we've created and have in the RPAG system. But then how do we actually score those funds? We score them by using both quantitative and qualitative factors. So 100% of the scorecard is built with pass-fail criteria on a scale of 0 to 10, with 10 being the best. So that's that easy, simple to use number or score that can be directly linked back into that IPS. And then those quantitative factors. 80% of the fund score is quantitative, where we utilize certain things such as modern portfolio theory statistics, quadratic optimization analysis, and peer group rankings. And then 20% of the fund scorecard is qualitative. So we incorporate qualitative factors like manager tenure, fund expenses, and strength of statistics. So each of these 3 categories are all built the same, 80% quantitative and 20% qualitative. However, in the next section, I'll dive deeper into the value add that RPAG has provided by creating specific scorecards for each of these categories that tailor to exactly what we're trying to identify with each of these specific investment strategies. So the value add of the scorecard, I'll start with the active scorecard itself. So as I mentioned, for active funds, we're looking for those outperformers, whether that's on an absolute return basis or relative to risk, but we're looking for that active management that, we're paying for. And so here, again, 80% quantitative, you'll see on that left-hand column there, that's broken out into 30% style factors, 30% risk return factors, and then 20% peer group rankings. I'll highlight here for active funds, we're looking at these through a 5-year time history. So each of these analytics is measured over a 5-year time period. And what that equates to is that funds do require 5 years of history in order to be scored in the active lens. So I'll get into some of these factors just to highlight the value add of the active scorecard and that value it brings, because we've separated these categories to create more of an apples to apples comparison. Those style factors, we're looking at style analysis and style drift. That's returns-based style analysis. So again, looking at it from a full encompassing time period, that 5 years of history, rather than looking at it from a holdings perspective where we're just getting certain snapshots in time. This returns-based style analysis is an extreme value add when looking at the active management style, because we're able to look at how that fund is acted over that 5 years of time. And then risk return factors, very important to look at with active managers because we're looking for that outperformance. We're looking for that added value that active managers can bring. So the active scorecard was tailored specifically to incorporate analytics and metrics that are important when identifying skillful active managers. And then finally, peer group rankings. I think it's extremely important to note here, RPAG has created custom peer groups. So I used that apples to apples comparison earlier. We've created custom peer groups to do this again for this as well. When looking at certain peer groups, whether that be large cap growth, we're looking at large cap growth active managers and creating a peer group specific to its mandate. And those peer groups include not only mutual funds, but CITs, separate accounts, all different types of specific funds. So that's an 80% quantitative, which was weighted by design, as I mentioned, and then 20% are those qualitative factors. So the primary considerations we look at in the qualitative area for active managers are manager tenure, fund expenses, and strength of statistics. So moving on to the next category, we also have an asset allocation category and an asset allocation scorecard, which again, similar to the active, we've chosen and weighted by design specific metrics and analytics that will help identify those skillful asset allocators. So you'll see the breakdown here identical from the weightings, but each of those analytics have been specifically chosen and designed to identify those asset allocators. So those style factors are still 30%, but we're looking at risk level and style diversity, which are more important to look at when identifying skillful allocators. And then those risk return factors, we're still trying to find those, outperformers, those asset allocation funds that will bring us value from a risk return perspective. And then those peer group rankings, again, custom peer groups specific to asset allocation funds. And that sums up the 80% quantitative factors there. One thing too that's very unique to RPAG and asset allocation funds specifically is that when measuring asset allocation funds, we're looking at 5 years of history, similar to active. However, we're measuring each of the asset allocation funds against a custom style benchmark that was specifically designed for each fund. And that's because there's no identical 60-40 balanced fund out there or 20-30 vintage in a target date fund. The job of asset allocators is to, diversify their portfolios, allocate to different areas, whether that be US equities, international equities, commodities. And so by providing and creating custom style benchmarks within RPAG, we've added so much value by being able to compare against a benchmark that actually matters. And so again, 80% quantitative there, and then those 20% qualitative factors, those main points that we're looking at here are manager tenure, fund expenses, and strength of statistics. So we went over active and asset allocation funds, which look at that 5 years of time period. You'll see that this breakdown here in that weightings changes a lot when we look at passive funds. And that's because, again, we've broken out these funds into 3 different categories. Passive funds are trying to achieve a lot different mandates than those active and asset allocation funds. So same breakdown, 80% quantitative. However, we've removed those risk return factors and replaced that with more style and tracking factors and more peer group rankings, analytics and metrics that matter more to passive funds. So we've specifically designed the passive scorecard based off of passive funds and how we should identify skillful managers in the passive space. And then those qualitative factors here, the primary considerations we're looking at are fund expenses and strength of statistics. So just to overview this one again, we're looking at 3 years of time, 3 years of history for funds. So passive funds will score once they've reached that 3 years of history. And we've removed some of those factors that we saw in those previous because we've specifically designed the scorecard to identify skillful passive managers for this one. So that was a lot of information that I just threw at you all. So I created this slide to really capture an overview of that. and highlighting those 80% quantitative factors, 20% qualitative factors for each. The value out of the scorecard is that we've specifically designed each scorecard, that active asset allocation and passive scorecard, specifically to identify those skillful managers. For active funds and asset allocation funds, those specific breakdowns and weightings will look very similar, but we've handpicked each of those analytics within each of those factors specific to active and asset allocation funds. And then for passive funds, you'll see that style and tracking and peer group rankings are factors that we've swapped out for that risk return aspect for those active and asset allocation funds. So again, looking for those skillful managers within the passive funds by looking at it through a lens specific for passive. And then those qualitative factors are only 20% of the scorecard. Still important, but a lot less weighting than the quantitative factors. And then I'd specifically like to point out that for passive funds, we've removed that manager tenure as a primary consideration for passive funds. And that's just because of the nature of passive funds. They use more quantitative models when creating their tracking and style purity for their fund mandates. So that manager tenure isn't as of a weighted importance as, let's say, fund expenses or strength of statistics from a qualitative lens. And then finally, to go over the value add that the scorecard brings, I've touched on some of the primary advantages that the scorecard brings to the table. That first, I think I've highlighted how much the scorecard aims to find skillful managers. We do that by not looking at just absolute returns or one metric. We do that by looking at a handful of different analytics that are specific to each of those categories: active, asset allocation, and passive. So we're looking at it through multiple lenses to identify those skillful managers, and then relaying that in a simple, easy to use number that can be directly integrated into an IPS. And so by having that simple integration into an IPS and creating a repeatable, documentable process, we're able to reduce that fiduciary liability for our plan sponsors, which is another advantage that the scorecard brings. And then the third advantage of the scorecard are those custom style benchmarks and peer groups for asset allocation funds. I went over that in the asset allocation scorecard slide, that no two balanced funds are the same, or no 2045 vintages of target date funds are the same. That's exactly why the custom style benchmarks are such an advantage and value add of the scorecard. We're now able to actually measure and look at asset allocation funds from an investment due diligence process by having these custom style benchmarks that RPAG has created. And then finally, returns-based style analysis is a huge advantage of the scorecard. By looking at those style factors, which are a component of each scorecard or category, the active, passive, asset allocation, we're able to look at it from an all-encompassing view rather than just snapshots in time. So that returns-based style analysis is something that's pretty unique to RPAG and is a huge advantage of the scorecard when looking at those style factors. So I've gone over the scorecard design, how we've actually designed it here at RPAG, why we designed it, and then went into the value out of the scorecard. Now, how can you actually use the scorecard to maximize your investment success? There's a lot of different ways that you can do that. One is just by using the scorecard as a standalone tool. If you want to dial down your investment due diligence, want to keep it very simple to that 0 to 10 metric. But if you have plan sponsors that want to really dive into the metrics, see why a fund might be getting a 6 rather than a 10, I recommend using the asset class review, which is a great visual depiction of each scorecard analytic. And we have these 4 active, passive, and asset allocation funds. So if you're not familiar with the asset class review, these can be run throughout the site, and they can be inserted directly into your fiduciary investment reviews, or FIRs as we like to coin it internally. And you can add multiple funds to these asset class reviews. So let's say a fund has been up for review for quite some time and you want to compare against another fund, you can pull multiple funds into the asset class review itself. Another thing that I'd like to note here is that we recently made enhancements to the asset class review. We hear RPAG's members, what we might be lacking, and we find ways to improve that. And the asset class review is one way that we've done that. So there is still a primary benchmark that is used for scoring purposes, and that will be bolded in the asset class review. However, for some of those passive funds where there might be a benchmark misalignment, we've added secondary and tertiary benchmarks where applicable. So that will just add to your investment due diligence process and really allow you to dive deeper if a plan sponsor is looking for more of that deeper dive. So I've highlighted that in this slide here. This is a screenshot of just a sample asset class review where a large cap growth fund might be tracking the S&P 500 rather than the Russell 1000 growth, which we use for the RPAG scoring process. So here's where within the asset class review, you can see those tracking differences and be able to see that it's just simply a benchmark misalignment where you can get into that deeper dive within the asset class review itself. So again, these can be pulled within the system and can really maximize your investment success during these fiduciary investment reviews by adding this to your report. Or you can keep it simple and just stick to the scorecard and that 0 to 10 scoring system. Now, the asset class review is just one of many reports that RPAG offers that can add and help the scorecard shine brighter in your investment due diligence reviews, investment due diligence processes. So the asset class review is just one. Score history is another one if you want to look at multiple quarters of scores, not just 1 or 4. Fund fact sheets can be pulled, which we actually leverage Morningstar's information and database there. So if you're wanting to see more Morningstar analytics, those fund fact sheets are a great tool that can be incorporated. We recently partnered with MSCI to create an ESG ratings report, and that can be added as a complementary tool to the scorecard if plan sponsors are looking for more ESG oriented funds. So if they want to, look at it from a different perspective or just add in their investment due diligence process. And then finally, as a lot of you may know, we've added the scorecard with CIT equivalents and returns analysis with CIT equivalents to help alleviate that pain that we might have experienced with the new SEC ruling coming out. And so now the scorecard with CIT equivalents provides an option for plan sponsors to review some of the CITs that may have lost their score due to that SEC ruling. So all of these tools and reports can be used to help maximize your investment success and also help let the scorecard shine.
Thank you so much, Karina. We really appreciate you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.